just being able to say the Eucharistic prayer, it was absolutely surreal. And yeah, those are days that I look back to, moments of prayer, like every Good Friday. I think all of us will, our mind just goes right back to that moment where we laid down our lives. But
Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to Continuing the Call, a seminary dropout's guide to discernment. I'm thrilled to be back here, finally recording episodes again. I spent all summer traveling the country speaking and on mission trips and starting a new school year. So I'm thrilled to be back and having awesome conversations like this one. It's with Father Andru O'Brien of the Diocese of Peoria. I met Father Andru this summer on one of those mission trips, and seeing him witness his priesthood and the joy of his just ministerial presence really made an impact on myself and everyone there at the camp. So it was awesome to sit down and kind of hear how he ended up where he is today. As always, I ask that you say a prayer for Father Andru and for all those he ministers to. And as we go back on this journey of having conversations centered around discernment, I ask that you say a prayer for this show. If you haven't done so already, please share it with somebody who might find it helpful or impactful. And as always, keep praying for vocations. We so desperately need men and women to accept the call that God has for them. So thank you again for being here, for supporting this show. Please continue to do so. And without further ado, here's my conversation with Father Andru O'Brien. All right, Father Andru, thanks so much for being here. Do you want to go and introduce yourself, and then we'll work backwards?
yeah, sounds great. So I am Father Andru O'Brien, a priest of the Diocese of Peoria, and I have now been ordained for 6 years. So I was ordained May 26th, Feast of St. Philip Neri back in 2018. Spent 3 years working in Peoria at a parish and grade school. And then for the last 3 years, now starting year four, I've been at a high school in Champaign, Illinois, as well as a parish here in town.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Love it. And yeah, I know we have so much to kind of get through, but let's go and start with the big question. When did Father Andru become an initial thought? Did you grow up wanting to be a priest? When was that first call?
Yeah, so my parents, after I went to seminary, they started telling me stories of my childhood. And I guess when I was four or so, my great grandma Kate had said, "Oh, he's going to be a priest." And so she had always assumed. My grandparents had always prayed for one of my dad's brothers to go to seminary, so either him or his three brothers. And looking back at their life, I don't think that was in the cards for any of them. And they'll all be the first ones to tell you that. But the day that I went to seminary, man, my dad's parents were ecstatic. So there was a lot of prayer going on behind the scenes. And then obviously serving. I grew up in a suburb of St. Louis, and there the pastor every week, I think he knew my parents were trying to pawn me off, so I would pay attention. My ADHD would kick in, and so every week I just got to serve, and I'd go up, I'd go run back to the sacristy, I'd say, "Hey, do you have any need for me?" He'd make room for me, and then send me away. So I always loved being in the sanctuary. I always thought it was because it made life go a little faster on Sunday morning, but it was really my junior year of high school that everything kicked in. And so the summer between sophomore and junior year, my band section leader had asked me if I wanted to go on a retreat. So he came up to me and he said, "Drew, saw you at church on Sunday, and we need one more guy for this retreat." He had been spending a few months planning. It's a Teens Encounter Christ. I don't know if they have those down in Texas, but it was a big retreat, except for the year that I was going. They were at 11. They needed 12 in order to have it. The director said, "We're going to cancel it if we don't get 12." So he came up to me on Monday morning of band camp in between sophomore and junior year. He said, "I have a form for you. Need you to fill it out. Love for you to come. You're going to have a great week." And I said, "Thank you." So I took it, and I'm very environmentally conscientious. So I recycled that right away to make sure that I saved the planet. And he came up to me on Tuesday and said, "Did you get that form filled out?" And I said, "Unfortunately, I lost it." And Wednesday, Thursday, finally, he corners me in front of my mom, and she is my partner in crime. And she could see on my face that I did not want to go. And she had no idea what he was talking about. He said, "Hey, did you get that form filled out?" Catching me in front of my mom. And she looked at me and she said, "Do we have something that weekend? I can't remember." And she just
Wow.
quick on our feet, tries to cover for me, but I was stubborn at that point. I'm like, you catch me in front of my mom, I'm definitely going to this just to prove a point. So I went. And even as we were dropping, my parents were dropping me off. They were like, all right, are you sure you want to go? It's not too late. And I see everyone staring at me from the window, and I'm like, I think I'll go. They all see me already. I have to go, and I can't really fake sick because I made it in the car. So I went in, and it was that week that a weekend that I really experienced Christ alive in his church. And so the towns that I had always grown up in were very Catholic culturally. Right, St. Louis obviously being a very Catholic area, and then Bloomington, Illinois, where my family moved right before high school. That was another town. It was either you went to Eastview, the mega church, non-denominational, or you went to one of the five Catholic churches. And so that was really what I knew is cultural Catholicism. But what I would hear on Sunday in the pulpit, and then what I would see at work in the lives of the people that I was sitting beside, they didn't really line up. And it got very frustrating for me because you hear about love, you hear about temperance, and then you see the opposite. You hear about goodness and works of mercy, and then you don't see those at work. So it got very, very difficult for me. And until finally I met this group, and they actually would go to adoration when we had it, and they cared about what they were seeing. They would go to prayer. They would talk about their prayer. They would talk about their relationship with Christ. They actually read scripture. They actually paid attention at Mass instead of taking the 15-minute wandering bathroom breaks. And and that was inspiring to me to see all of these people. And so I wouldn't say that week I met Christ, but I definitely met his church. And so he was alive, and the members, they were striving after him, and they just became the people I wanted to spend time with because there was an authenticity there. There was a coherence of life that I didn't see anywhere else. And it was that group that ended up calling me deeper. So right before we took the ACT junior year, a group of them said, we're going to daily mass before we have our test. Do you want to come with? So we had a late start that day. There was 8:30 mass. So we all met. They had been doing it for Lent. It was one couple that had started going as their couple Lenten resolution, and they invited a number of us. So that became our routine. We just would go to daily mass before school, and then we would if we had time, we'd run by McDonald's, but it was always daily mass, school. And I realized those days were great. And then there was a girl that I wanted to meet, and I decided I would talk to her friends. And they said, why don't you come to the Adoration Chapel on Friday afternoon, or Friday evening? From 7 to 8, the youth group was in charge of a holy hour. And so the seniors had to make sure that it was filled. My friends, the juniors, said that she was going to be there. So I went, and I'll be darned, she never went a single time. It was never a Friday I went that she was there, but I met the Lord deeper while I was there. So one group had me going to daily mass, another group had me going to adoration every Friday. And I just noticed in my heart there was a shift, right? So again, this is my junior year of high school. And obviously, every teen has one goal in life: get rich or die trying. And so I was thinking of anything that I could do to to fulfill that goal. But then all of a sudden, I'm like, I don't really care about that. Maybe I will start to think about teaching. And I loved English. So maybe I'll start thinking about teaching. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, maybe I'll start thinking about teaching English and religion. Maybe I'll start thinking about being a youth minister so I can work full time in the church. And then all of a sudden, my mind started going to what would I preach about during Mass? What would I be saying? What would it be like to be a priest? What do they do all day? And there was this curiosity that opened up. And so there's this whole tapestry happening. And then finally, my buddy Joey comes up to me and says, what are you thinking about doing for college? And so I just pour all of this on him. And he's like, I'm in the same place. Do you want to go visit a seminary? So I impulsively said, absolutely. And then I quickly went home and Googled, what is a seminary? And I remembered as I was looking this up that the seminarians had come and talked to us when I was in 8th grade. They were doing vocation promotion, but that didn't mean anything. It was when I had that personal invite that everything in my heart unlocked. Like I opened the computer, I saw this is where guys go to become priests, and I'm like, this is possible for me. And that was a wild moment. And it was one of those kinds of things that it unlocks in your heart. And I'm sure when you like understood that you were called to marry your wife, right? Immediately, you're like, she's
Yep.
the one. And you never look back from that moment where it's like, this is so perfectly clear that this is what I'm called to do. I know it and I'm going for it. And that was when he invited me, when he said, do you want to go visit a seminary? It opened my eyes to the fact that this could happen for me. And all of these questions, all of this desire to be close to the Lord, that just opened up for me. And I couldn't see myself doing anything else. So
Wow.
that is a lot of time in a short time.
Yeah,
So
no, absolutely. It's always funny to watch priest and also couples kind of like break down the marriage story where it takes out all of the like the blood, the sweat, and the tears and all of the long nights of like, man, what's happening? And you have it all nice and packaged, but we don't get to see, a lot of the struggle.
yeah, but every time you tell it, some new version of it. It's the same story, but some new version of it'll come out. And so sorry for interrupting you,
Yeah,
bro.
which no, it is incredible because it's true. It's like you tell that story and it's funny, and I think that is the Holy Spirit working oftentimes because it's like this person who's listening to it is probably relating to this aspect, which is true, and it's not made up, but sometimes the Holy Spirit lays out versions of it for the person to be like, oh wait, hey, yeah, that is actually me. I love the way you kind of break it down into these steps, but all coming back to witness and having examples, starting from initial discipleship, right? This idea of having a group of friends who said, hey, we're going to go pursue the Lord, even before priesthood, before, anything. It's like, hey, we're just going to do this.
Mhm.
And then it snowballs from there. And it's incredible too, because having met you outside of this, I remember when we were setting up for camp, we were at Catholic Heart this summer, and at our particular camp, we had multiple priests, multiple seminarians, a deacon, and I was like, hey, normally we have servers, but we have so many people, we probably don't need them. And your words were, you're right, we don't need them, but it's probably good to let some of these kids serve. And hearing now the story and the reasonings why, and it's like it's incredible. I think how often we overlook invitations to service,
Mhm.
and invitations to be a part of it when that could be the key, that could be the shift in, a young man or a young woman being kind of, invited in to pursue a deeper relationship with Christ that may, cultivate a call to religious life or the priesthood in there. So it's awesome to
Mhm.
see that lived out now. So now, take me through. You get to seminary, you're there, and you're like, I'm all in. Did it meet expectations? Was it completely new to you, or what was that kind of long stretch of those years like?
It is a little bit of everything, right? So I got there and I was on cloud nine. Right. So my mom is apparently the player of this story today, but we walk in and we were a family that we went to mass every single Sunday, but we weren't your typical like our life revolved around the parish kind of family. We were in our pew, 11:30 mass, right over by the choir. We had our spot, but we weren't going to the Bible studies. We weren't praying the family rosaries. And that's just not how my parents were formed, so they didn't
Mhm.
know any differently. Like it's been beautiful to watch their faith unfold. But I still remember my mom, the day they moved me into seminary. So I was up in Minnesota at Immaculate Heart of Mary in Winona, and we walked in. We were one of the first ones there because I was so excited to get there. And we open the door, we walk upstairs, we're trying to figure out where to go. She screams out, oh, it smells like church in here. And her response was, wow, this is a lot. My response was, this is awesome, right? I did the math. I'm now 203 steps away from the chapel. Like, this is sweet. And I could just go downstairs. Jesus is in the house. And I had guys on the floor we were all the youth ministry kids. We were all starting out. It was the freshman move-in day. There were, I think, 16 of us that moved in the first day, and there were about 20 seniors that were helping us. And we were all excited, right? Because here I was in a youth group, so I had 5 guys that I was good friends with, but here I had 40 in the seminary, well, 60 my first few years. And we were all pushing each other. Like we'd go outside and we'd play ultimate frisbee. There was, yeah, there was awesome. It was very inspirational. And then just to have a group of friends that immediately they were like, all right, we're gonna go drop to our knees and pray, right? Because we're doing everything for God's glory. Like that was, I'm like, what's happening? This is so cool. Like we could pray while we're playing ultimate frisbee. This is awesome. And then yeah, like the liturgy is absolutely stunning. We had a really beautiful Sunday night vespers, and that was one of my favorite times of the week. We got to do a holy half hour, and then it was chanted Compline on Sundays. And then the rector would bless us, grand silence until morning. It was beautiful. Yeah, the classes, theology. I remember my first religion class. I went predominantly to public school. I had 3/4 of a year at Catholic school in eighth grade, but the rest of it was public school education. So I'm sitting in religion class and we're studying the catechism, just going paragraph by paragraph. We had an awesome professor, and I'm taking notes on everything. And I just remember all the guys are like, man, you are so interested in this. I'm like, this is great. We get to study the stuff that we love. Like I listened to Catholic radio in my car when I was in high school, but that was all I got. And now I have a whole class where the grade doesn't really matter because I'm getting the content. I have a chapel where I can go pray a holy hour every morning. I can pray a holy hour every night. Like I was so pumped. But routine hits eventually. And so there were different seasons, and part of it was because I'm in Minnesota and we're in winter time. But we were on a college campus, and so there were definitely times where my prayer life would start to slow down, because you've been to seminary, you know what it's like. Sometimes there's just this weird temptation that can enter into the building where it's like we have a fight to see who can almost be like least churchly,
Yeah.
and you don't want to be the overly pious guy, but it almost morphs into we're gonna find out who can be the least churchy and who can relate more to the students on campus, who can be the cooler guy. And so that spirit, as I was praying, that could start to rise up. And those were the only times that I ever really doubted my vocation, but they were always perfectly timed by the Lord and his providence. So I remember there was one moment I'm like, I just almost completely gave up praying, and the Lord used that for my good. So I went to the rector and I'm like, Father, I don't think the Lord's calling me to be here right now. And so I'm just going to move on to campus. I'll finish out my degree. And this is my going into Christmas break of my junior year. And so he's like, all right, call your vocation director. So I called the vocation director, and we get through about 3 days, and we're in the classic be good before break conference. So the rector would always pull all the guys in and remind us, you do not get a vacation from your vocation. You are a seminary and everywhere that you go. So we're sitting in that conference. I don't remember a word he says. I'm like staring at the ground, and we had been playing before every conference. Father Greg Ben Merle would play Piano Man on the piano, and he learned the harmonica about halfway through seminary. And so we were all singing Piano Man, all 50 of us. And I just like the whole conference stare at the ground. I'm like, what am I doing? I haven't been praying. I haven't been focusing on the Lord. And obviously I want to leave because I don't want to do his will. I'm being constantly surrounded by good guys that are challenging my spirit right now. And so the next morning after mass, I sat outside the rector's office until he got there, and I said, Father Melvin, I cannot leave. And he looked at me and started laughing, and he's like, yeah, I called your spiritual director, your old spiritual director. I called your vocation director. All of us were so confused. Your formation advisor, like none of us understood. So you don't have to leave. And it was that Christmas break then that I ended up like rededicating myself to the life of prayer. And I was blessed to come back to an 8-day Ignatian retreat where the Lord just like rocked my world and made prayer more than just I would show up, I would do the readings, and like in my early days, especially as I'm discerning, I would just play the little Bible roulette, and I'd figure out like where do I want to go. And I had a little paperback New AB NAB, New American Bible that they had given me on that initial retreat. it was creased right to John 21. And I thought it was an absolute miracle that every time I opened my Bible, it was the call of Peter. And so like that was my spiritual life. Like, let's play Bible roulette, let's read different things. But it was there on that week that I really discovered the Lord's personal love for me, the deep relationship that he's inviting me into, the truth of my identity as his beloved son. And and again, the Lord always allows our difficulties, our failures, our wanderings to work for our good, where he draws us back as the good shepherd, but he does so with a vengeance. And so I would say that that's kind of the story of my seminary life in the early years. I
Mhm.
bounced around from seminary to seminary, but I would say looking back like that, those were years that I absolutely love. And I think every priest would say this, and we're always telling seminarians, and I'm sure every priest was telling us, like if we could do it all over again, we would just stay there and cherish every moment that we had. Because there were, as you know, there were those days where we're just like anxious, eager. Get me out of here. I wasn't ordained to be or I didn't come here to be a seminarian. I came here to be a priest. And it's like all of us now wish we could go back and be like, no, let's just receive from the Lord. Let's spend that time and study in prayer and fellowship, and then we can go out. But that's what we long for. And so I
Yeah.
would say meets expectation.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I'm glad you share kind of that little bit of the dip and the hiccup of it, of this kind of, temptation to make it almost too, I had a friend who would always describe it as like almost like surgery, right? We'd almost make it too sterile of an environment in the seminary, in the sense of like, yeah, you didn't want to be the guy who was, overly pious, like you said, or, you didn't want to be the guy to actually like tell everyone what you've been praying about. I liken it now that I'm married to, you fall in love with your spouse through dating and through all those like, cute romantic gestures, and they're great and they're accepted when you're dating. But when you're married, so like something like buying flowers, like I've encountered this multiple times. There's days where I'm like, what, let me buy my wife some flowers. I'm at the grocery store, they're on sale, and because I'm not going to buy them at full price. But I'll buy them and they're on sale, and like I've had the person checking me out, like make a joke saying, "Oh, like what did you do?" or "Oh, is it a birthday or anniversary?" And it's hit me of like, oh, we're like, it's almost expected to not do nice things for your significant other unless it's a big grand gesture. And I think it's the same in vocational discernment. You get into this place where you're kind of complacent and you're like, you don't want to be the guy doing the extra holy hour. You don't want to be the guy giving kind of your spiritual flowers to Christ in your vocation, which is so wrong. And as you said, it leads to this moment where you're like, maybe this isn't where I'm supposed to be. If I haven't asked my wife on a date in, a couple months, I start, being like, man, this marriage thing is tough. Whereas if you're doing those steps and you're realizing just the beauty of it, so yeah, never stop falling in love and doing those things, and they don't go out of date, right? Like they don't, they don't fall out of style. It is important to keep your vocation alive the same way that you found it. So I'm glad you bring that up as a warning to guys and girls. Go all in, right? Whatever you're doing, whatever got you there, keep doing those things, because that's what's going to keep that flame alive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember our senior skits when I was a senior, the sophomores would get a chance to make fun of us. And my big roast was that I if they couldn't find me, I was in the chapel. And I'm like, that's a looking back, I'm like, that was a source of shame for me for whatever reason as a freshman, because I had all the upperclassmen like, dude, you need to chill, you need to relax, you need to go out, you need to be with us. And I'm like, yeah, there's probably a degree that they were right, but it morphed in my heart into this like, oh, I shouldn't be doing these things because no one else is. And that was where I loved, like there's so many nights, it's a Friday afternoon and I'm in the chapel and amazing things are happening in my heart. And as I look back, the guys that were making fun of me, the guys that were giving me a hard time, pulling me out into the world, they left a semester, 3 semesters, a few years later, but it was the guys that respected me and were there alongside me and kind of pushing me that they're the priests that I reach out to now. And so yeah, I think that's a an important reminder is we're there for the Lord.
Yeah.
And if guys or girls aren't there ready to accept that, then they're eventually going to fade away like I was about to when I wasn't praying. But for those that stay, like that becomes a source of edification.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Now, take me to the day of ordination and in the first couple of years of your priesthood. What was ordination day like?
Oh man. So my favorite ordination story is actually my diaconate. And our diocese has had this long-standing tradition where the ordinandi get to pray a rosary with the bishop in
Mhm.
his private apartment. So he has this beautiful sitting room. And so we'd go up, we'd sit with him, and we got to pray a rosary with our vocation director and the vicar general, the bishop. So all the top dogs and whatever seminary officials could join. And it was just a private moment where it's just a guy praying with the man that's about to impart on him the Spirit. So we're there before my diaconate, and it wasn't just me and my classmate. We also had, I think it was 35 permanent deacons that were being ordained with us.
Well,
And so we're in this room, and it's a beautiful tradition when it's two guys. When it's 37 guys, I'm like sitting on top of the bishop's private desk and like surrounded by all these guys. We're in our albs, in our not in stoles yet, but we're there and I'm just sweating. I'm anxious, and I just get this sense of I want to be anywhere but here right now. And so then Bishop calls me over after the rosary and he's like, "Hey, are you okay? Like, is everything right?" And I'm like, honestly, I want to be everywhere but here right now. And so he looked at Monsignor Gray, who's now in charge of the Sheen Foundation, and he looked at him and he said, "All right, Monsignor Gray, I need you to get this guy in line and don't let him leave." And so my diaconate was a whirlwind, but that's one moment that I remember where it was the two of us right in the back, and it was an act of sheer will for me. Yeah, they and I say the two of us because my mind is thinking of another story where we had an MC officially designated. His one job for the day was to stand in front of the two of us and make sure that we said I do when it came to the promise of celibacy. Because we were ordained with all these guys, 35 others are not taking a vow of celibacy, but we were. And so his job for the day was to make sure that both of us made our promise of celibacy, and from the back. And that was, but it's been it was a beautiful year of service alongside the Lord. And then the actual priesthood ordination was absolutely stunning. And they mixed up our liturgy, which got me crying right away. So usually our tradition as a diocese is we blast God beyond all praising
Mhm.
as we're processing out of the church. And John, our organist for the cathedral, he put it first. And so we're walking out, and the organ pipes open to "Oh God Beyond All Praising." And I just like lose it. Because here I started after high school, 8 years, 7 years, I'm watching other guys. Now, after 8 years, I'm finally there. And it's my moment. That was the moment I was waiting for it. I was like, oh, I'm a wreck. And and then, yeah, just all the moments laying down our lives for the Lord, like just hearing all the saints that were being prayed over us, having the whole church of our diocese applauding for us. And yeah, just the moment of standing beside the bishop. So it was the bishop, Father Mattingly, my classmate, myself, our vicar general, and we have a monastery, so the abbot. So the four of us are around the bishop, and just being able to say the Eucharistic prayer, like we had our own chalice in front of us, our own host in front of us, and so just to be able to stand there with the bishop, like it was absolutely surreal. And yeah, those are days that I look back to, moments of prayer, like every Good Friday. I think all of us will, our mind just goes right back to that moment where we laid down our lives. But as you know, just like marriage, and I'm in the middle of marriage season right now. So I've been preaching this left and right. Like that moment is beautiful. Like the moment of oblation of giving my life to the Lord at ordination, your moment of oblation where you're giving your heart to your bride there in your vows, like those are beautiful moments. And as the church is beautiful, as the bride is beautiful, our mind says like this person deserves my best. But then you get into the grind and the beauty doesn't seem so beautiful. Like it is, but it's definitely hidden under a few veils and struggles, trials, crosses enter in. But I would say that overall ministry has been absolutely beautiful. My whole priesthood has been filled with Catholic education and religious sisters. So my first parish, we had the Ann Arbor Dominicans. We had six of them, and at times we had up to eight of them in the convent. And those ladies got me through COVID. And then here, now that I'm in Champaign, we have five sisters from the Sisters of St. Francis of the Martyr St. George. We just had a huge argument in the school about the official name of their community. We had a trivia question during one of our competitions, and it is not the Franciscan Sisters of the Martyr St. George, although in German it technically is, but in America it's Sisters of St. Francis of the Martyr St. George. So we have those sisters at the parish, and just to have young women that have given their lives to the Lord has been very edifying. And then to have opportunities to form children in the faith. Like Catholic education has taught me over the last few years that the catechism nailed it when they said, quite simply, the desire for God is written on every human heart.
Yep.
Like we know that, but to actually be able to sit with kids of every age, of every lifestyle, of every background, financially, racially, ethnically, we have a number of foreign students. Like I have been so edified by just the number of students that come to me at the high school level now that I'm in high school, sit down in my office, close the door, and say, Father, I know I need to be doing better. Can you help me? Every student, almost across the board, will say that. And then to work with Catechesis the Good Shepherd at my grade school, we had like our fifth graders a few years ago at the first grade school that I was at. They actually petitioned the school, right? The fifth graders themselves started a riot because they
Wow.
didn't get to go to atrium anymore. It only went to fourth grade, and they're like, no, we want to go to atrium. We want to have this relationship with the liturgy, with the sacraments, with the Lord, with Scripture on that personal level. And so to hear little kids talking about Jesus's love being poured out into the chalice, to hear young students talk about the Lord being their shepherd as the one that cares for them, to hear little students who have are playing with the small chalice and host, and the light comes through the window and they're like, it reminded me of a sunrise where Jesus's love comes rising up over the darkness. And it's like, you're 5 years old, like
Mhm.
you are a mystic. And the desire for God is written on every human heart. That
Yep.
has been one of my biggest takeaways. And then during COVID, the older priests, they sent me out as the young guy. They're like, all right, you are young, you are healthy, and we are not. So until we figure out what this thing is, you're our guy. And so I got to go into the hospice home almost every day and just work with people in their final hours. So final days and hours, sitting with them. Some were unable to talk and they didn't have family because, right, those early days, we all remember how it was. Even spouses were like, I don't know if I can go because they were in a hospital. They might have COVID. I might die, and who's going to take care of the family after that? So like I was sitting with people that had no one else, and the people that were able to talk, they had regrets or they had joys. There were beautiful moments where I had just very holy people. I had one lady, I will always pray for her. She fought me on not deserving God's love. And I'm like, man, that is the whole point. Look at the cross. We did not deserve it. And when she finally, like, when that truth finally clicked, she broke down and cried. She accepted anointing. She accepted reconciliation. And I pray is with the Lord now. Like those are beautiful moments. Again, the desire for God is written on every human heart. And so you see that alive. But yeah, getting to know families, getting to just spend life with people, and then walking into situations knowing I have the power to bring Christ into this is quite profound.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love it, and your range of ministry was something that's it's so apparent in the way you're telling stories, and also just having been around you, seeing that. I think it was so apparent how clear you made it to your students and your parishioners and even your staff. That is your role. We were all amazed at how quickly your students and your staff were to grab you for, whether it be for confession or spiritual direction or just questions. And it's not very often that you see somebody embody the priesthood so perfectly and like in the whole range of it. So it was incredible. And now with that, where do you think that desire comes from, especially for these young men kind of grabbing you for discernment questions? And, what do you think makes a difference that, they're going to you and not, their friends or their family, and they're having those conversations, but what do you think about you as a priest makes it, that much more enticing to be like, what, I have to sit down with him and ask him these questions?
Mm. Yeah, so I would say for a lot of the students that you got to meet, it's their families. These kids are rock stars and they've pulled their friends into their lifestyle, but we have so many families that have raised their kids so beautifully to be around the church and the priests from the time that they were young. Like you remember Toby, his middle name is Stanley Lewis after a priest of our diocese. Like his middle name is named after a priest that's friends with his parents. And so there's those families that are constantly connected. I have the luxury at the school of being just in their lives constantly. And so I'm thankful that our bishop has set aside personnel for this because it's beautiful ministry. And the students know that they are always welcome in my office. But as I told our new students yesterday, I will always ask you one question. Do you just want to hang out? Right? Are you just bored of study hall? Or do you need to talk? And the entire student body knows if any single person comes into my office and says, Father, I need to talk, and they're like, it's talk, then everyone is sent back to class. And it's funny because they will all stand up, they will grab their stuff silently, they'll walk out and they'll say, the room is yours. And no one complains, no one grumbles because they know, like, I am there for the person that needs me the most. And so I think that the students know, like, if I'm playing dodgeball, they can pull me aside because that is more important. So I think they model it well. The students at the high school have embodied that, and then I would say that the witness of my students allowed others the freedom to do that of like, oh, we can just pull him aside. And it's like that's what we are as priests. We are constantly available. We had a retreat, would have been 3 years ago in our diocese. It was for all the priests ordained less than 10 years. So it was more of a workshop than retreat because we were hanging out, smoking cigars at night. But we had Father Brett Brannon. There we
Yes,
go.
yeah, yeah.
And he gave us a conference and had one line that all of us have internalized. And that was he said, he gave us an article and the takeaway line was that a pastor should never be busy because busy implies that we have more on our plate than God's will actually demands of us. And so we should never say, I am too busy because that turns people off. It rejects God's will and it says, no, I can't be for you. And they don't hear the right now, but it's, I can't be here for you when you need me. And so he said, instead, tell people I am very busy. My schedule is full of many important things. There it is. My schedule is full of many very important things, but you are the most important to me right now. Because we're ordained for souls. We're ordained for God. And even Alphonsus Liguori in his works on prayer and on priesthood, he says, or maybe it's Francis de Sales now, I'm getting the two of them mixed up, but one of them says, when someone pulls you away from prayer, do not be angry about it because that is God coming to you in a different way. And so that's something that I've always tried to live by. where there are definitely seasons where I'm like, all right, I can meet with you, but it's gonna be in 3 weeks. And then there are other people where it's like, I'm going to cancel my meetings and bump someone a week because you are more important to me right now. And so I feel like Jesus, when he says our ministry as priests or our apostolate as Christians is to go to the lost, the broken, the vulnerable, like those, that is true. If they ask something of us within reason, we should go, right? But when someone calls me at 9:30 to ask what time 7 o'clock mass is, I'm gonna be a little salty. It's only happened once. It's at 7 o'clock.
No, I can only imagine all of the yeah, the random calls and the things that aren't exclusive to the priesthood that you have to answer, especially with your students. But
Yeah.
priestly things, absolutely, you'll clear your schedule for.
Hmm.
Now,
Yeah.
so I kind of want to close with this. What is you being in the thralls of high school, kind of that prime discernment age? What's the biggest hurdle or biggest roadblock you see a lot of these young men and young women facing when it comes to discernment and religious discernment in particular? And what's your advice to them to overcome that particular objection?
Yeah, I would say that we in our ministry to the youth right now, as a church, we are just now getting to a point where we're really emphasizing relationship with Christ and obedience to his will in the present moment. And I think that if we get to that, then that overcomes all the hurdles. So we've all been teenagers and we know our parents are the dumbest people on the face of the earth. So not many students are really going to avoid God's will because their parents won't let them discern. The ones that are there, they're gonna go. Like my parents and I, we butt heads a little bit, and they eventually subsided, but that wasn't gonna stop me. Um, I would say that more likely that people aren't going because they're not exposed to a relationship with Jesus Christ. And if you don't have a relationship with Jesus Christ, you don't internalize the Christian worldview, where there's something more important than what the world has to offer. And I think as well, joyful witness. There were a few seasons during my assignment that were just very difficult on me personally, as a high school chaplain. And I could notice because I'm split between a parish and a high school. And thankfully the diocese allocated another priest to the parish to give me more freedom, to be more present to the high schoolers. But I was just so stretched, so tired, so crabby that I had a dad come up to me actually, and he said, "Hey, my son came to me and said he doesn't feel like you love him because when he came to you, you were stressing on your email." And I didn't put it down because I felt so overwhelmed. And if priests aren't available to young men and women, obviously we have a great shortage of religious. And so if women aren't exposed to actual religious, then that witness becomes less attractive. Because a lot of us want to go when we see the life well lived, when we see it as something that I can do and I want to do because
Mhm.
he is really happy and I want that. So yeah, meeting the seminarians definitely was an inspiration. So relationship with Jesus Christ is important because it gives us the Christian worldview. Relationship with priests and religious is important because it shows us what the life can actually look like. Um, Parents need to be holy. Parents need to lead their kids closer to Christ. But by and large, I think at the end of the day, it's just going to be what Jesus Christ told us to do. Beg the Lord of the harvest to send out more laborers for his harvest. And so if communities are not praying for vocations, communities are not going to grow in vocations. I started adding it last year to our daily announcements and to our petitions. So every morning at morning prayer, we have a calendar of all the seminarians from the diocese. Every morning before our opening prayer, we say, and we remember in a special way, I think it was Luke Olson who was today. We pray in a special way for Luke Olson, our seminarian from the diocese. And then we pray for them. And then at each and every single mass, we pray for an increase in vocations, priesthood, and consecrated life, especially from our school. And since then, we have had 3 girls that asked if they could go and visit a convent, and we have
Wow.
had 6 guys ask if they can go visit a seminary. And do I think that it's because they hear the prayers? No, I think it's because the Lord hears the prayers. And
Hmm.
so there's just this increase in desire and there's a culture. And so my hope and prayer is that we can become one of those parishes and schools that pumps a guy out every year. I see them around, I know they're out there. And if we can keep interceding for the Lord and we remain faithful to him, I think that we can have a lot of those parishes around.
Yeah, absolutely. Amen. And yeah, I think you absolutely nailed it. That joyful witness, especially. And then especially in your end, I don't want to put all the weight on the priest and religious, but yeah, having somebody that a young man can look at and say, you know what, I want to be like him. Like that's the
Mm,
guy I want to be like. And you certainly live that out, and it's incredible seeing. That was one of the reasons why I'm like, I want to dive into your story and hear it. And it's incredible and it's beautiful, but doesn't even come close to witnessing what you do in person. Um, and so now, with the last thing that I want to end with, what's your advice for married couples? Now, kind of being on that end of it, the one sitting through marriage prep and prepping these couples to, have lifelong happy marriages. What's the one bit that you always kind of throw in there to make sure that, hey, don't forget this part?
mm. Something that struck me last year. So my first wedding was for a group of friends last summer. And it was for 2 friends, not a whole group of friends. It was just for one couple, and they intentionally placed their wedding on the Feast of the Sacred Heart. And so obviously, if they're getting married on a Friday because it's the Feast of the Sacred Heart, I got to talk about the Sacred Heart. And so I just meditated on that beautiful icon from St. Louis. It's one of my favorites. And it's just got Christ kind of peacefully holding his heart out. And I've been struck by that image because when the church says join your right hands, and there Christ is, he's holding his heart out. And so in that, and as you join your right hands and you make your vows, you are saying, I'm giving my heart entirely to you, and you are giving your heart entirely to me. But there's that third procession in the nuptial blessing where Christ entirely gives his heart to each of you, right? Or to the newly formed couple. And and you didn't know what Amanda had in her heart or what the future held for the two of you, right? You guys didn't have that story. You didn't know what the next day held. You didn't know what the reception held, right? You had a good idea because you planned it all, but you didn't know that you would be here now. You didn't know that you would have the little petty fight last week, right? All of these things, but the Lord did. And he gave the grace to navigate through that moment to you at the moment of your marriage, right? Because that's how sacraments work. It is a seed that is planted, that is grown through experience. And so I always tell couples like twist your ring when life gets hard or overwhelming or you don't know what you're supposed to be doing. Remember that it's made a sacramental because it's blessed. And just say, all right, God, I didn't know that I would be here right now in this conversation, in this fight, in this difficulty, in this struggle, in this wondering, but you did. And so you promised. And that's been the prayer that I constantly tell couples to go back to. Go back to your vows, go back to that moment where you saw the beauty of the one that you wanted to give your life to, and then twist that ring and say, God, you promised. Promise that you'd give me the grace to navigate through right now. So help me to do your will here.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, no, that's phenomenal advice. Could have used that last week in our petty little fight we were having.
Yeah, there you
But now
go.
but now it's in the tool belt, so I appreciate it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and I'll say to Amanda, he did not tell me if there was or was not that.
yeah.
That he's spitballing. So,
Yeah. It's usually a safe bet though.
yeah,
But no, you're
it's
absolutely right.
marriage. Yeah.
Looking back to it of like, yeah, it's okay to not know what you're saying yes to. Obviously, in your vows, you're saying yes and you know that you're saying yes to love that person, but it's okay not to know what that love is going to look like and what it's going to be. And it's almost better if you don't, because I don't know if you would, if you knew, what it would look like. It's only in hindsight that you appreciate the grace that comes with it.
Mhm.
But yeah, phenomenal advice, Father. And yeah, it makes sense. You're doing what you're doing because you're pretty good at it.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
we'll see how long we can keep her rolling.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Father Andru, thank you so much. Please know of my prayers and those who are listening's prayers for you and for all those students that you work with. And yeah, I can't wait to see how many young men and women you lead to their vocations just through your joyful witness.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.